Welcome to Gulfstream Park. It is February 9th. Christina Bosanak is here, and I have the pleasure of being joined by one of our friends to the north. Don't adjust your TV sets, folks. You're not watching Aqueduct on a Sunday. Andy Serling from Naira is here, and actually in town for it's a big day for the Fox show.
Yes, the kickoff for the Jockey Club on Fox Sports 1, and we're pretty excited to be kicking it off here at Gulfstream Park. Obviously, the Don Handicap's a pretty exciting race when you have the 3-year-old champion will take charge, sort of starting his run towards potentially Horse of the Year, and along with the Grade 1 Gulfstream Park Handicap. It's a really great 2 race to kick it off, and obviously we're very excited, and that's on Fox Sports 1 at 5 o'clock today. So you'll want to go away from the simulcast signal at Gulfstream and watch me and the crew instead of you.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Is that the way it goes? All right. Well,
it's a big day for you today, right?
It's a huge day, and then hopefully you miss out some of the great information that we give out here. But so much great TV, and obviously coming hand in hand with great racing. But we had a really nice day yesterday, and a couple of really interesting graded stakes, and one of which was the Gulfstream Park Sprint. We're going to have a look at that. And Andy, what were your impressions? I think the winner, obviously, extremely impressive.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important race for today's Don, because Falling Sky had finished second to Revolutionary in his last start, and that was a very tricky race and a tricky day, because believe it or not, that race had gone a 1/5 of a second faster than Leah did in easily winning the House Hope later. And I think a lot of figure makers felt that the race track had speeded up, or it was an aberrationally odd, slow race in the House Hope, and subsequently made the figure much higher. And it seemed to make sense for the House Hope. But subsequent to this horse running an amazing race, and I think he got a buyer speed figure of 104, people are looking at their figures, and I know that the Revolutionary figure is now 103. And I think people need to take note, and maybe if you think Revolutionary is too slow off his return race, his chances have gone up in the Don, I have to think.
I think that whoever was going to back Revolutionary, they're probably not going to get as good of a price as they were probably a day ago. But we also had the Grade 3 Swanee River, and a filly that won, Perranda. Really, the race played into her hands. The pace was pretty slow.
Yeah, and you give Jose Lezcano credit. He did the right thing with her. She's not really a speed horse. She's more of a horse that does her best racing stalking, but he knew there was no pace in here, and he took advantage of it. And really, and also her competitors, and we had talked about this last night, the Judmont horse in the rail ran very well to be second, a horse that frequently doesn't get out of the gate well, but Perranda's a nice filly who has really handed this race.
Yeah, and she wasn't supposed to be up front early. I spoke to her trainer prior to that, and he said he didn't think that she was going to be up front early, but I guess she inherited the lead, because what else were they going to do?
Had he looked at the PPs of the race? Or?
Well, he was hoping somebody else was going to...
Really?
He was hoping somebody else was going to go, but, you know, she has natural speed, and she showed that.
Yeah, she certainly has more speed than the others, and I'm not really sure why so many people are afraid to send their horses to the lead, and maybe you wonder when a lot of riders are rating speeds if they're getting the wrong instructions, but she won nonetheless. She's a nice horse.
Well, we're going to take a look at today's card. We've got 12 races on tap, so we're going to on to the first race today, which is a 30,000 claiming event. It is a mile on the main track, and I went with number 7, Rowdy Miss. Tori Stevens, the son of jockey Gary Stevens, he's been doing pretty well with a limited number of horses here.
You're going on that sort of the genetic angle from the trainer, from the rider to the trainer.
You know, if his father can ride, you know.
I know this was an extremely tough race. I think your horse is helped by drawing outside. I felt like my picks were not in the goofy range, but I thought it was a very tough race, and I ended up on the 1 Perfect Praise for Dale Romans. Dale actually has pretty good numbers when he goes turf to dirt overall. Actually, at Gulfstream, he's just under 20% with an ROI of around 2.25. And if you look back at the dirt races, they're against better horses. They're not that good, but I think they're in line for the horses that he's running against today. And I just thought he'd be a fair enough price on a race that, frankly, I found this race to be as difficult as any race in the card. I had trouble getting a real handle on it.
It could be very competitive, and we start off with a competitive race. And on to the second race on today's card, which kicks off the early pick 4. There are 3 pick 4s on today's card, and my top selection was the number 1 pick of the litter from the Dale Romans barn, and came in off of a layoff, and last time to finish I thought a pretty good third behind a couple of really nice horses.
Yeah, you know, he's an interesting horse. His race 3 back, actually, where Positively came out of that race. I think he finished 4th in there, and he came back to win. I think 4 of the first 5 came back to win. He's the only one. Actually, he came back to win as well, and then off the turf race. And last time he was wired in a race where I think the closers really never had a fair chance. And it's just sort of a race, I think, for both of us that goes through Dale's horses, because you have Pick of the Litter down the inside, and is obviously hoping to get some pace, and you have speed in the outside with Positively. But I think Tui Square is going to have speed. You've got the trainer change to Todd Pletcher, and it appears to me this horse is running as a first-time gelding in this race, and I like the gelding angle. And he always seemed to have some ability, and it just never came out last year in his campaign. He ran in some tough spots, and Dale likes to take chances on the Triple Crown Trail, and now a more reasonable spot. Not an easy spot. These are good horses, but I thought maybe the new horse for Todd might make the difference at Gulfstream.
Yeah, he did have a lot of he was a talking horse last year. And what do you do with number 3, Majestic Cause?
You know, I wonder if he's going to be as effective at a mile. He's been such short prices in all his races, and this is a very, very competitive race. And as much as I respect Marty Wolfson, the job he does, this looks like a tough race for him. And when you look at a horse that he won at 3 to 5, he won at 2 to 5, he lost going a mile at 4 to 5, and now he's facing better horses, I'm going to let this horse beat me.
On to the third race on today's card, which is a 30,000 claiming event. Mile 16th on the turf. Few scratches, number 2, and the 11 and 12. And my top selection in there, I went with Dysprosium from the Mike Maker barn. Going to be showing speed in here, but it's really tough to look past horse Hothersall. I had him in my top selections as well, but I think that we went in the same direction.
Yeah, Hothersall's been a good horse to bet against at Gulfstream. I mean, he's been a Todd horse that sort of had his chances in New York, and he was in a race where, even though Hardest Core, who beat him, is a good horse, he had everything go his own way, and he came down here and kept getting overbet and losing, and now Todd is dropping him off a cliff. And for what it's worth, first time in a claiming race on the turf, Todd's numbers are terrible. He's 12 for 56, which on the surface isn't that bad, 21%, but those aren't good Todd numbers. When you consider at short prices they are, the ROI is only $1.25. This is a bad move for him. Down at Gulfstream Park, he is 7 for 22, but it's a negative ROI, and like you, Dysprosium is a horse that I fell for when he went to New York and turned out just to be completely wrong. But a claim for Mike Maker and Ken Ramsey, something that's worked so often during the year that I'm not going to ignore it here.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're going to stick with what works, right?
Hopefully.
On to the fourth race on today's card, which is the Grade 3 Hurricane Birdie. And a lot of excitement around this race. Number 1, Groupie Doll from the Buff Bradley barn. She's making it's her swan song, a final start before she goes off to the breeding shed, and is bred to Tap It.
Are you sad about this? Are you taking this hard?
I'm taking it a little bit hard, yeah.
Really? Well, she did really blossom here a couple of years ago. You know, it's interesting when you think about Groupie Doll, how last year they didn't like the way she was training down here, and they ended up laying her off, and she came around and obviously won the Breeders' Cup. I thought there were other fillies that had maybe better years than she did last year, but she's a remarkable horse, and arguably maybe the best race she ran was her last race in the Cigar Mile, where she had real trouble on the turn and still finished a good 4th in what was a very solid field. I just think she's a little vulnerable. I mean, I'm not that worried about the rail because, you know, with the speed of Jamaican Smoke, she's going to clear her easily, and 5-Star Mama in there as well, so she shouldn't have that much trouble getting position. But I don't think she's in such a field where there's such a layover, and Wildcat Lily could find her old form. She's good, and maybe they'll be running hard up front and Heart Stealer for Marty Wolfson to continue to get it done. She did finish ahead of Munning's sister last time, who ran just a remarkable race on Thursday. Yeah,
she won the Awesome Feather. That was an overnight stake on Thursdays. And Heartstealer, I had her in my top selections as well. You mentioned Wildcat Lily. She finished second in 2 Grade 1s in New York in the prior S and the test. So she obviously has some class as well. But Groupie Doll, I'm looking for her in terms of her to carry her class. And she's been a little sporadic in the mornings in terms of her training, you know, when she works well and she doesn't work well. However, you see, I'm hoping her class is going to get her home.
It probably will, but I think she's the kind of vulnerable horse, as you said. Maybe she just won't have as much, and maybe she's ready for the breeding shed. She's certainly done enough on the racetrack.
She certainly has. And on to the 5th race on the card. It's a 5.5 furlong race on the main track. It's a maiden special weight for 3-year-old fillies. And there is a scratch, number 1, Tasmona. And I went with number 2, My Miss Sophia from the Todd Pletcher barn. And Todd's pretty seriously. He's good with these first starts. She actually has
I've heard that.
She has. You probably have. She actually has some breeding a little bit on the bottom side. A very very fast female family.
Well, she hasn't. The dam hasn't produced very much.
No.
I don't think that's run at all. But she is a half to Eye of the Tiger. The dam. It was a pretty good horse. I think actually the breeder actually raced her. She raced pretty much in California. I've gone broke betting against Todd Pletcher horses my entire life, so I'm not going to stop now. But one thing that I've made a lot of money doing in the last year is taking Kieran McLaughlin horses, especially for Darley, first-time Lasix, because Darley, decided not to use Lasix for their 2-year-olds. So when he has put Lasix on his horse, especially maidens, it seems more on the turf, but in general, they have improved dramatically over the last year, and I'm going to stick to that with gratitude. A horse who ran against Gracer, who ran a huge race and beating a very weak field yesterday at Aqueduct, but is a very, very promising horse for Tony Dutrow. And in that race, she was just sort of run off her feet, and I'll go for the Lasix angle over Creative Spirit, who I actually think is a little bit more interesting than it looks. The other speed in the race that Creative Spirit ran at Gulfstream came back to improve its buyer figure 15 points next time out. So maybe that's a better race than it looks.
Yeah, and actually Gratitude has a lot of pedigree as well, because the mare is a full sister to Horse of the Year Tis Now. So a lot of pedigree in that with number 8 as well. On to the 6th race on today's card, and there are a few scratches in there. Number 3, 14, and 15, and it is a 25,000 allowance optional claiming event, 5 furlongs on the turf. I went with number 6, Kiss Me Lola, from the Lisa Lewis barn, and ran a very good race last time to finish, just to get nosed out. And I see that you went in another direction.
Well, I think the horse that you want out of the race on January 20th is All About Caroline. And it says steady to bid at the 5/16. I mean, this horse was badly steady to avoid a spill, and this horse would have won the race, in my opinion. I don't even think it was close. I think that All About Caroline was absolutely much the best, and easily lost 2 lengths with that move in there, and also was kind of rallying when it happened and may have lost her momentum, so it could have been even more detrimental to her chances. The problem with her is perhaps the connections had her sort of geared up for that race, and she won't come back in a few weeks and run as well as she did that day. But for me, just based on the race they ran, I have to take All About Caroline in there, especially with Free West Scratch. I respect Kiss Me Lola. She's a very nice horse, and Forever Road is a horse I've always kind of liked for Carl Domino, who may have just woken up last time.
And I also used a number 8, Call Me Lawyer, who is coming into this off of a 2 victories, and the most recent was January 20th. And on to the 7th race on today's card, and this race kicks off the Rainbow Six. There is a carryover. It's over $525,000, so there's a lot of money on the line there. And no scratches. There is a jockey change. Number 3, Ambitious, will now be ridden by Joel Rosario. And my top selection, I went with number 4, Vita Vittoria. $400,000 for this daughter of Medaglia d'Oro, and at the OBS April sale. And this is the kind of thing I look in terms of, it hasn't really shown much in her first 2 starts, and those were for Chad Brown now with Marty Wolfson. She sold as a yearling for $50,000 and then came back in as a 2-year-old and $400,000. So there was improvement, there was advancement. So they're very well meant.
Yeah, I'm feeling this might be one of the cases where Chad wasn't that upset to lose this horse from his barn based on the races it ran. The race at Parks last night was kind of a funny race where it sort of moved up, and maybe she just found going the 2-turn mile too far. And the truth is, I don't think there's that much to say about her races, and I can't speak for you, but I'm relying on Marty Wolfson to sort of work his magic and get this horse to run her best race. They paid a lot of money, as you said, and it just hasn't worked out. I'm a little scared of the first or Giant Fable in this race. John Kimmel has done, he's run 6 first-time starters down here. Now, only one of them have won, but it was Friend or Foe. It was a very good stakes horse, and 3 of them hit the board. I think that horse could be a little dangerous, a firster.
Yeah, definitely one to use. I also used number 8, and that's Previous, and from the Bill Mott barn. And here's another one with first-time Lasix as well.
Yeah, Bill's numbers, actually, for what it's worth, layoffs of over 180 days with his maiden sprinting are just 1 for 10 with a 69-cent ROI, and 8 of them were very short prices.
On to the 8th race on today's card, which is another maiden special weight, and it's a 1.16 on the turf course. They're also eligible is scratch number 12, and Carlos Olivero on number 1. And my top selection, I went with number 8, Leader Avenue, and has some turf breeding, very well bred. Also a half to a stakes winner, Sumo. That last race, pretty modest splits, and just got edged out late. And we take a look at that video, but What did you do? It seems that you went another...
I'm glad you're showing the video because I think it's important to point out the eventual third-place finisher, Pappy, because this horse had an absolutely perfect trip in here. A great ride by Jose Lezcano, sat in the inside the whole way, angled out in the stretch. Yeah, the horse, the Gray, leaned on him a little in the stretch, but he had no excuse to gain. And Christophe Clement has his firsters ready to run on the turf. And I think if he doesn't run that well first time, it's not really reasonable to think he's going to show great improvement in his second start. And not only against him and Leader Avenue. Leader Avenue was a first-time Lasix horse, took a tough beat with last time. But, you know, March Reward, I know it's burned some money for Dale Romans down in Kentucky, but if you look at Trackus, and I know you have to look at Trackus, March Reward traveled 68 feet farther than both Pappy and Leader Avenue did in that race, and really didn't get beaten that much. And I think with an inside post today and a better price is a much better bet.
Who do you think is going to show speed in there? Leader Avenue last time that was there. I mean, those were pretty average splits. You think March Reward's going to have a speed?
I'd like to think Corey Lannerly at least leaves for position. I always want my riders to leave for position, and I think Leader Avenue probably goes, but maybe the three can make it a little tougher on him today.
On to the 9th race on today's card, which is another maiden special weight. I love these maiden special weights. A mile and an,
good thing.
A mile and an 8 on the turf course, and this is the final, the late pick 4 of the afternoon. And my top selection in there, I went with number 13, Overtone. Don't love the post from post 13, but coming into this off of, I thought, a pretty useful second place effort. And if you look at this filly was debuted in Stakes Company up at Woodbine.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page with you with this horse. And also with a mile and 1/8 on the turf, the run is so long to the first turn that you don't have to have that much of a worry about getting spun out as long as your rider can get position. The Dam was actually a 6-time winner on the turf. Now, she's the only one of 8 in the second generation that won on the turf, but she was good, and it's just a second full. I understand the 6 can win this race, seeking her glory, and that the winner party now beat her last time was second at stake, but she did lose by almost 5 lengths, and in a turf race, you can lose by 5 lengths and be 9th, so I don't know how good that performance was. And Sava is a horse that interests me a great deal in here. Jonathan Shepard's been known to have his horses need a race first time out, and watching that race, she ran like a horse that could probably run a little bit better second time out, and Sava is my sort of stab of the day at a big price to try to get in there somewhere.
And she was coming from off the rail last time. I also used a number 10, and I see that you did as well. Number 10, Closer to You, and this is a 3-year-old filly by Smart Strike, a multiple Grade 1 stakes winner, the Dam U, and the half to a nice turf horse as well.
Yeah, she's not having a turf winner in France. Now, it's really a dirt family, and I think it's like Christophe wanting to put this horse in the turf. I don't know, maybe she's shown nothing in the dirt, but of course, You, I think, is most remembered by that great race against Carson Hollow in the test at Saratoga, where Jerry Bailey rode You, and it was one of the great races of all time, and she was just a tremendous racehorse for trainer Bobby Frankel.
And on to the 10th race on today's card, which is a 30,000 claiming event. Mile and a 16th on the turf course. There is one scratch. Number 13 bears Dixie. I went with number 3, Tie Dye, and you were talking about John Kimmel.
Yeah, I just feel like I know Tie Dye, and I know Tie Dye just isn't reliable to run well from one race to the next. And obviously her last race would make her super tough in this race. I just don't trust her. You look at her PPs, it's not like she's ever super short prices, but she's been in good spots and failed. I thought the one Very Playful was interesting. Tim Hills has good numbers stretching out. At Gulfstream, he's actually 5 for 32 with an ROI of over $3. If you look at Very Playful, her best races may be going long. I think there's some other horses in here like Love That Kelly, who has a chance as well. And I'm looking to sort of fool around with the 1 and 9 in this race.
Okay, very good. And now we get into our first Grade 1 of the afternoon, the Gulfstream Park Turf Handicap, which was so exciting here last year. We had Animal Kingdom and Point of Entry. It was just so fantastic. And we don't have any Animal Kingdoms or Point of Entries in this year, but this 9 furlong test on the turf, it's pretty competitive betting race. And you and I were talking about it last night, and I went with number 6, Amir's Prince. I think not only does Amir's Prince love the turf course, is very effective at the distance, and I think if there's going to be somebody who's going to be bringing a horse back off of that kind of layoff, hasn't raced since last March, it is one one Mr. Bill Mott. We've seen him do it time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, he's got great numbers. He's 24% with 46 stars and almost a $2.5 ROI off of 250-plus day layups in the turf. He's only tried it in one graded stake, though, and that one he lost. The problem I have with Amir's Prince is I'm not certain that he's the best horse in this race, even if he was fit. His last race, I mean, he beat Wilcox in by walking along on the front end. These are better horses, and Summer Front, and I respect Amir's Prince, and I hope he gets his act, gets back in gear after missing all that time, but Summer Front, he had a perfect trip last time, but his race 2 back was a sensational effort against not only Silencio, who's one of the top turf milers in the country, but also winning Prize, who won last week in the stake at California, and is also a very, very good horse. And Summer Prize got this great trip in this race, but he showed 2 back he doesn't need great trips, and for those that are worried about the distance, he should have won the Jamaica at a mile and 1/8 at Belmont and encountered incredible traffic. An argument could be made the second horse probably should have come down that day, the good horse King Creasa. And I don't worry about the distance, I just worry about the price. And I'm taking a little shot with Imagining, who I think can sit a good trip outside of Tetradrachma here, and perhaps he'll get the jump on him. And I've never been his biggest fan, but I think he's turned his career around. His race to win the Red Smith at a mile and 3/8 last time was an exceptional effort with not an easy trip and much, much better effort than I'd ever seen him give before. And he's got some good races when things have gone his way, and I think they could today.
I think if he's back on 9 furlongs, he could be quite effective. He's proven that he can run. And also, I threw in there number 8, Boisterous, first time with Todd Pletcher. I know that you're not so high on this horse.
Well, you can't put them all first, and I won't be shocked if he wins, but Todd's really got to resurrect this one. And off trainer change in the turf, his numbers are very weak, under 20% and a low ROI. And Boisterous was never as good as some of these horses, and his form had tailed off. But it is a real Phipps connection in this race with the 7 and 8, both one being a Phipps and one an ex-Phipps horse. And of course, they won it last year with point of entry.
It's funny because I think Todd's actually become he seems to be a very effective turf trainer, at least down here. He's been winning time and time again. So I've actually been quite on that.
I worry sometimes that they're better off being bet the second time.
Okay, very good. On to the feature race of the day. It's the final race, 12, the Dawn. It's a Grade 1 event, a mile and 1/8 on the main track. This is a really exciting race, and both of us, obviously, we've gone in completely different directions. I went with number 2, Will Take Charge. We're going to take a look at, however, at Revolutionary, his last race. We were alluding to that a little bit earlier. Revolutionary beat Falling Sky, and Falling Sky just came back yesterday and was very impressive. Yeah,
it's a visually unimpressive race for Revolutionary, who was in a drive pretty much for a half mile in here. But as you said, Falling Sky really validated the race. And for what it's worth, second off a layoff in a graded stake at Gulfstream Park, Todd Pletcher over the last 5 years is 16 for 33 with a 330 ROI. And we saw some devastating performances. So if Revolutionary is ever going to step it up, it's going to be today. The question is, will he get the right trip? I'm trying to beat Will Take Charge, who's shipping in off a 20-hour van ride from Oak Lawn. I think there are horses that are more pointed for this race than he was.
Well, River 7 has been very impressive. I went to see both Will Take Charge and River 7 the other day, early in the morning, and Will Take Charge was a little bit hot on the first day that I saw him Wednesday morning. He got progressively better. I went back on and saw him yesterday, and he seems to have been handling the weather. River 7, really sharp and alert. He's on his game. He's busting down the barn when I went up to Nick Gonzalez's barn, and he's got some pretty serious speed.
No, he should be in a good position this race. I think that Leo will probably go. Romance and River 7 should be in pursuit, and I think that all 3 of those horses can win. I went to Romance because I've always liked him, and he ran a very big race against weaker in the Discovery, but I think you can make an excuse with a wide trip against a gold rail at Parks on Pennsylvania Derby Day, and I'm hoping this is breakout day. He'll just be a good enough price for me to take him, even though I think Revolutionary may be the horse to beat.
Well, that's a very exciting race on today's card, and that is our feature, but we have so much going on. We do have the Rainbow 6, $528,000. There's a carryover and Super High 5 late. We've got guarantees in the Pick 5 and the late Pick 4 of $200,000. So much going on. It was a pleasure to have you on, but you're going to be busy for the rest of the afternoon.
I will be busy, but I'm looking forward to being here, and I appreciate you guys having me on at Gulfstream Park, and I'm thrilled to be here and looking forward to the Fox Show.
That's one Mr. Andy Serling from NYRA joining us today, and I will be back for the rest of the afternoon with Ron Nicoletti. So, folks, stick around.